Without further ado, I'm going to start the presentation. Oh, no. Oh, no. What we got to do? This is part of the presentation, as you probably already know after the intro. Technology created by human, and we make mistakes, and we have different things coming up in our life all the time. It's interesting to see how sometimes, if you don't speak the language, you probably wouldn't understand what it means by looking at this page, white text on blue screen. There is, however, this picture that probably some of you know, this little whale lifted by 8 little birds back in the days when Twitter was using it through 2008 to 2013. Every single time when Twitter is over capacity, people will be able to see this visual representation. And it was being named as the Twitter farewell by the users, and I was very lucky to be here. I created the artwork back in the days, and I want to kind of tell you the story of how I created this. But to me, which is more interesting, is to see that this was the first error message, kind of make the users happy, and they kind of tweet about it using different languages from around the world. But to me, that's more impressive and amazing is to see users from around the world actually were inspired and create their own version to interpret this 2D illustration into all kinds of 3D the physical representation. So you have the Japanese lantern, and then you have the Australian sculpture, and then there's this amazing art piece from Tokyo, street art from New York, Lego, actually, from an ex-Lego spaceship designer from Denmark. And Singapore government liked it so much, and they actually had it as their official poster for transportation. And then you have cakes around the world, And why stop on cakes? Let's get some drinks. Very soon, you're actually going to get some drinks in real life. And so in New York, there is this farewell pale ale beer label contest. I actually was one of the judges. This is the winner. And in 2009, the very first Shorty Awards in New York City, which celebrates the best content creator on social media, literally served these farewell-inspired cocktails. I had 7. I was smashed. And fashion statements, it's really amazing to see people from around the world also create different interpretation as a fashion statement that's inspired by the color scheme and also the visuals. So you have artists from Los Angeles to artists from Venezuela. It's really amazing to see people just get really creative inspired by this mash of tech and art. And also hats from around the world. On the right is actually an engineer from Adobe, and this was a hat during the Halloween season. And to me, this is all these creations really just makes me smile to see people engaging with the artwork and also a community. And this is the extreme version. Actually, in Florida, somebody tattooed it on the leg, and it made it into literally made it into CNN. And what's more interesting is how these artwork actually brought me from different places. So my name is Yiying Liu. I was born in Shanghai, China, moved to Sydney, Australia, and did education in Sydney and also studied in London, UK. And eventually, because of this whale connecting me to a lot of founders and startup company people and just amazing friends in Silicon Valley. And eventually, I came here for the first time in 2009, and I moved here about 3 years ago. So I used to work with a lot of startup companies. I used to be a creative director at 500 Startups, which I help a lot of startup companies. But in the same time, now I wanted to bring more art to the tech community and really kind of bridge the gap between tech and art. And the passion that I have is, if you look at the word functionality, like this word function, there's fun in it. It's just, you don't necessarily see it all the time. And so my passion is to bring the fun out of functionality, because I believe these two things can coexist. And then if you look at the traditional way of communication, which is I always believe the medium is the message. You have the message here, which is the text. But the form is also a way of communicating the message itself, with which I believe that colors and art can transcend the linguistic barrier. I guess the reason why that, if you really look at the content, it's pretty much the same. It's telling you something is wrong. The technology has a failure. But the way that it's being communicated here, it's wordless almost. It's transcending the linguistic difficulty and barrier. It's more direct. I guess that's the reason why that Instagram resonates in a lot of people, because sometimes a picture worth 1,000 words, or more than that. And that's also the reason why I think people from around the world, the global users, feel more connected immediately to the service. The power of visual really lies into the use and the combination of the tech and art. And in the same time, I think it was really amazing to see more and more companies employ this idea of bringing art into the actual product and using art to humanize the usage or the interface or the user experience in their product. So as you can see, Yelp has this cute little chipmunk, and then you have LinkedIn, who's like a wizard, and you have GitHub, the Octocat, in Star Wars scene, and then Airbnb was actually an animated GIF or GIF animation, whatever you prefer to call that. So it's really wonderful to see all the companies, tech companies started to kind of knowing and seeing the value of artwork and applying it to their product. So the first takeaway I'd like to show you is I for Integrate, which is really encourage and enable more specialists from different areas to work together and putting the fun into the functional. Now, I do wanted to give you a little bit insight. Like I said, I wanted to give you a bit of insight about the story of the Twitter farewell, or the original name is actually called The Lifting a Dreamer. So probably some of you know, or a lot of you probably don't know, this illustration was originally an artwork, and it was artwork that I created when I was in my final year at university. And it was really funny because originally I created this artwork as an e-card. Because I was growing up in China and I moved to a lot of different places. So at the time, I was in my final year at school at New South Wales. So I thought, well, I couldn't physically be in a lot of places for their anniversary, wedding, or birthday party. I really want to kind of express this feeling of I have this massive, massive wish that I want to send it to you. But I couldn't physically be here, so I'm using art as a vehicle to send this message that I have little birds to carry this big wish across the ocean for you. And so I thought, what's the best way to express this is to visually having that onto a physical manifestation into a picture. And the next thing I did was, because I was towards the graduation, and that was about 12 years ago, I thought, well, why don't we put it onto the internet and then see what happens? And the next thing you know is there's this very teeny tiny startup that was born in San Francisco, and now you probably all know it. It's Twitter, and one of the Twitter co-founders and creative director, Biz, found my illustration online and licensed it, and the rest is history. And it's kind of crazy also, the illustration was featured in a lot of mainstream media. And also, you can see a lot of really amazing user-generated content online, which I love, and I also wanted to continue doing this to use the artwork to inspire more people to create. But in the same time, this is a story, actually, I probably tell it the first time in Smashing. So in the same time, I was going through this career blockage, or like, if you really ask me if this is a career, I think a lot of times, I don't see doing design or art as a career or a job. I rather see it as a calling. I think it's something I believe everybody has a gift. And a lot of times, you know, the best thing you have is you have this passion and love, and you can actually make something, create something that is called the work. And if you can combine the work with the love or passion you have, that's the best thing ever. That's such a gift. And so I was going through this really challenging moment, despite all the media publication and also amazing success of The Whale. I was going through this personal journey where it's great to see the user-generated content, but also there's commercial side of things that there are companies and individuals sort of use the artwork without consent, and there's also larger companies doing similar things, which kind of broke me little by little. And that was around 2000, I think end of 2009. I just becoming increasingly not sure about what to do with it. And I was just graduating from school, and I just started my design career, and it was overwhelming. And I wasn't sure what's the best way to solve this, because you have so much to give and create, but in the same time, you're not sure what's the reason to continue create if people are not taking care of your intellectual property or taking care of your creation. And so I was in this mental gag. I was in this mental just blockage. I didn't know what to do to move forward. And so I was trying to find a way to pick myself up, to cheer myself up, because I really want to have the strength and ability to continue create. But I don't know how. So I turned to comedy. I was watching a lot of comedy on YouTube and elsewhere. And that was by the end of 2009. There was this trending video on YouTube that caught my eye, which is this redhead talk show host that was just leaving this massive network called NBC. And turns out that was Conan O'Brien. And I never actually watched any of his show before because I lived in Australia, born in China. And so I didn't have that access back then. So it was a trending video, and it was Conan's last show at NBC. And I watched that 5-minute talk, his last show at NBC, the goodbye speech. And I remembered at the time when I finished that 5 minutes, I was in tears. And I was like, oh my God, I'm in tears. I don't even know this guy. This is insane. And I'm going to play that 1 minute, the very important minute in my life, to you right now.
Nobody in life gets exactly what they thought they were going to get. But if you work really hard and you're kind, amazing things will happen. I'm telling you, amazing things will happen. I'm telling you, it's just true.
So that was the moment I realized I was completely in tears, and I was like, I don't even know this guy. What is this? And I realized the words really having powers on me, and to me, that's a moment of realization that if you can practice what you love as your work, that's a blessing. And I know that a lot of times we come across a lot of challenges in our life, and we're just so weak that we don't want to even get up because we don't know why are we doing this. But if you can keep and remind yourself that moment, that little sparkle moment in your life that you almost forget about yourself and you're really enjoying that moment of creating. That's the sparkle, and collecting all these memories of that. And I remembered how happy I was when I was just lost in the creative process. I forgot about time, I forgot about space. I can just do the thing that I love, which is create. And I followed Conan's words and slowly climbing out of my shell and realizing that slowly gained back the strength of creating more work, and I continue to create and not really expect the result. Just continue to do your work, show up, do your work. That's what I love about Elizabeth Gilbert's new book. If you guys have a chance, you should read it, The Big Magic. It's the moment once you gain the strength back, little by little, just by doing the work, sheer labor of doing the work, you will get something really amazing. And that amazing thing actually being literally manifested about 8 months later. I got this email from TBS, completely out of blue. And they reached out to me, because at the time, Conan had his new show on TBS, and they wanted to commission me to do a new piece for Conan's new show. And at the time I received the email, I really thought it was a scam. I was like, what? And it was like late at night in Sydney, Australia. And I remembered the next day we jumped on a call. We were doing Skype. Initially, I was doing a voice call, but there was about 10 people in the voice call, and they're like, we want to see you, we want to see you. And I was in my pajama, and we ended up talking. I was in my pajama, like video conferencing. But this was a physical manifestation, actualization of what Conan said. If you work hard and just work hard and be kind to yourself as well. Not only just be kind to people, but also be kind to ourselves. Because we always have this criticizing voice in our head. You're not good enough. This is not good. It's great to have it, but when you're starting out, especially when you're starting a new skill, don't be too critical to yourself. I love this. I love this metaphor I heard from a great writing lesson, which is my writing teacher, Christy. She told me that I was just picking the writing lesson these days, and I think writing to me it's such a foreign language because I'm very comfortable with visual and probably verbal, but writing something onto a piece of paper seems so intimidating. And she said, to me, writing a lot of times it's like sculpting. When you make a huge sculpture, you have to carry all the mud and put it onto the table. But it's the same thing when you do the first draft. When you create something for the first time, you have to carry the mud onto the table. That process is crucial, essential, and yet you can't skip that. So stop criticizing yourself when you're putting the mud onto your table. And this is the message. I think a lot of times we need to be not only kind to others, but also kind to ourselves, kind to our creative and also vulnerable and potentially very sensitive self, and moving on. So I took that project and I made this piece of art called the Conan Pale Whale, because he's very pale, let's face it. And several months later, I actually got a chance to go to the studio and meet him in person. This is the first time I met Conan in person. We did a little dance. And also, it was really amazing to get his tweet about his whale writing addiction. So this is a bonus takeaway that if you work really hard and if you're kind, amazing things gonna happen. So kind of a little bit hard. Let's lighten it up a little bit, because the second project that I'm going to tell you is N for Nurture. And I'm sure how many people here uses emoji? Please raise your hand. Just say, I know. Okay, great, fantastic. So if you guys are using emoji, you probably knew that the dumpling emoji is on your phone from last year, and along with all the other food emoji. So this story, and I created the dumpling emoji artwork. The story goes back in 2015 when my friend, who's a writer and also now is a tech CEO at Plimpton, Jennifer A. Lee, she texted me this picture of dumplings, and she asked me to go and have dumplings together. And I was very excited. I was trying to reply her with a dumpling emoji, and I realized there is no dumpling emoji. So I thought, well, that's crazy. We don't have any dumpling emoji in the keyboard. And she said, good point. And so I was like, this conversation didn't go anywhere. But the thing is, and then I quickly realized, wait, I'm a designer, I'm an artist, I have imagination, I can do this. So I went back to my table, and I created the very first version, the alpha version of the dumpling emoji. I called this the bling bling dumpling, because let's face it, blings. So I sent it back to her, and she said, I love it. And the next thing we know is dumpling is actually very universal. Georgia has kakali, Japan has gyoza, Korea has mandu, Italy have ravioli, Polish people have pierogi. pelmenis, empanadas, crepes in Jewish culture. Chinese people have pot stickers and momos. It's around the world. It's a worldwide phenomenon. So, what can we do to bring this very multicultural global food into the hand of the people? So a bunch of friends and Jennifer and I, we created this foundation called the, very serious foundation, by the way. It's called the Emoji Nation. I also did the flag. And so it's a collective of people who are just passionate about emoji and wanted to bring it to everybody's keyboard. So we decided to do fundraising on Kickstarter where we request to have the dumpling emoji onto keyboard. But at the same time, we discovered that in order to get the dumpling emoji onto keyboard, we have to actually get the permission or get the blessing from this non-for-profit organization called Unicode. Unicode is a non-for-profit organization that is based in Silicon Valley. And every year, they actually have a lot of corporate companies that's sponsoring for the voting rights. So we were raising money in order to kind of getting into the organization and having a chance to get the dumpling emoji onto people's hand. So Unicode actually saw our proposal and our presentation, and they were very impressed. And they said, okay, Yiying, we think that your bling bling dumpling is great. It has a chance, but in the same time, if you look at most of the food emoji, they don't really have face, right? So we probably should get rid of the face. I was like, not really. If you look at the fry, there's actually something else. But he's like, no, it's okay. We don't need faces. So I'm like, okay, fine. We can probably get rid of the face, which is kind of like an empanada, not as interesting. But then they said, okay, we see your point, and how about let's make it 45 degree and just make it a little bit more interesting, because a lot of food here, if you see it, they're 45 degree. So I said, okay. So I made the 45 degree after staring at the dumpling for a long time. And the next thing they said is, we love the dumpling, the new dumpling design, but we also think it would be really great to have the takeout box, which I then made a takeout box, the chopstick, and also the fortune cookie as a set. So I made all of the design one by one, and then by this is early 2016, we went to IBM and we did the Unicode technical sort of a meeting, and we presented in person to one of the board member. And Alalita, who's one of the board member, tweeted online in real time, which is really interesting. Then we get a real-time tweet from Bobby in Taiwan. He tweeted back and said, actually, the figure crossed chopstickers means impolite in China and Japan to the elders. And I was like, oh my God, I grew up in China. I had no idea. So I then did some research, and it's actually quite fair. If you look at the traditional Chinese character versus the simplified Chinese character, there's the strokes are being simplified, and as time, progressing, there's a lot of things are lost in translation. I was just having a backstage conversation early on with Amanda. She just said totes agree. And I was like, is that totally agree? So it's like that. A lot of times things are being shortened. In Australia, we do the same thing. We call them, sunglasses, we say sunnies, or breakfast, we say brekkie. Same thing with university, we call it unis. And so anyway, so I think it's the simplified version of a lot of things, including cultures. But I wanted to kind of pay back to the tradition. So I decided to redesign the chopstick and make it slightly kind of next to each other, but not completely parallel, because otherwise it looks like a drumstick. And also correspondingly have the colors as well. So this is the final design. And in the end, I tweeted about it, and we had finally get the 4 emoji onto your phone in November last year, after almost a 2-year process. And it's really amazing to see that Apple's design is pretty much follow the original official submission I did. But in the same time, if you look at other platforms, because they also kind of wanted to have their individuality of the dumplings, so they have very different designs, which is fine, but it kind of defeats the purpose of having something universal in the first place. Because if you look at Emojipedia or Facebook, they, instead of having kind of this very universal empanada shape of dumpling, they had a xiaolongbao, which is a very specific Chinese dumpling, which I'm going to discuss the importance of this particular kind of shell-shaped dumpling later on, get very into the technical side of the things. So what's really interesting, it was right after that, this is last year, summer, I was invited to go to Shanghai, which is my hometown, to go to IDEO Shanghai to be an artist in resident in IDEO, China, for 2 weeks. And it's a really interesting way of co-creative process. And it's called the Creative Fortnight program. And it's the first time they did it in China because they think it will be really interesting to bring somebody to jam with others. So at the time, I was in the space, and what they had in brief is you need to create something that is going to resonate with the people and the space. We don't know exactly what it is, but the creative process you need to share with everyone. So this is kind of the brief. The brief is you're going to share how you create it, how you come up with the idea, and you need to talk to almost everyone in the space so that everybody get engaged. It's like a creative gym for people. Like you go to the gym to exercise your muscle, but you don't necessarily get a chance to really kind of exercise the mind outside of the work that you do. So this is kind of allowing people to have that extra space to think outside of their workspace. And I think it's fantastic because it also is a great way for me to communicate with a lot of creative people, and also people who are in IT space, people who are in accounting space, who are in legal space, and see their creative self being unleashed. So I talked to people, for example, this is Francie coming from Munich office, and she gave me the idea of the Munich Bavarian dumpling, which is, I'll show you later on. And I also realized, I wasn't sure exactly what I'm gonna do in terms of the project, but I realized that food culture in Shanghai was huge. So everybody was trying to engage me with new type of dumplings. So I thought, okay, well, this is maybe a chance for me to bring back the bling bling dumpling and create this new dumpling 3.0 that actually has a face, because let's face it, we can do anything with art. So then someone actually mentioned and asked me, one of the most common kinds of dumpling in China is called the wonton. So wonton dumpling, what's up with wonton? Why is it called wonton? And I never really thought about it. And I started to do research. And this is like a mind-blowing research. I realized, let's get ready for this. I realized that in Chinese character, wonton, which is almost similar character to, and same pronunciation, if you speak Chinese Mandarin, you would know 混沌 is the same pronunciation as primordial chaos, 混沌. And this is mind-blowing fact, because then I realized that after more research in the Ming Dynasty, in the 1300 to 1600, in the classic Mountain and Sea, has an illustrated version of wonton, which is the primordial chaos, being personified into a character that has 6 legs, 4 wings, with no face, but according to the record, it's good at singing and dancing. And that's new. And I was like, okay, this is amazing. And this guy is already viral in Japan. There's already like a lot of user-generated content in Japan. I'm not joking. This is all on the internet. You can search for it. And I thought, okay, this is insane. We need to do something with this wonton character, this primordial chaos character. And if you really look at the international cuisine of dumpling, the reason why they all have some form of dumpling, which is a pocket with something inside, you don't know what's exactly inside until you take a bite of it. And so the activity of eating a dumpling, which is taking a bite of this little pocket of food and discover what's inside, is a metaphorical way of explaining people discover the universe and open up a new possibility. You didn't expect that, right? So I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm gonna do something about it. So I came up with the very first version of my own version of the wonton, or the tiny chaos, because we don't want big chaos, but tiny chaos is manageable. The little universe of the tiny chaos or the wonton, and I present it to the team, and everybody kind of really think it has a lot of potential. The other thing I did, which I think was really interesting, is I started to create, different activity of the dumpling, what it can do, and also starting to engage with the team. So I came up with some basic activity or design styles, and then I engage with the team, whether you're a designer, whether you're a manager, whether you're a team lead. This is amazing. Like, it's a whole spectrum of the team, from leadership team to business development team to someone who's working in IT. They all work together and work on this art project because it's a great way to play. It's almost like giving an opportunity for people to play in their workspace during, like, after hours or lunch hours. So we host this little creative workshop and letting people to co-create together. And if you don't feel comfortable drawing, that's fine. You can still write down what you want to see. And so we have all these really fun, this is just some of them, all these really fun sort of ideas that people contributed to the project. And they come up with their own way of explaining what they want to see the little wonton character do. And I would choose some of them and implement them into WeChat stickers, because in China, most people are using WeChat as a sort of media messaging platform. And you can implement that right away onto WeChat platform. And we also did some international versions that honoring the people coming from around the world. And this is a really interesting, delightful, but also surprising process of literally within 2 weeks, we come up with all these things together. And it's also really great to engage with people online and offline as well, so we can actually send the little character right after they kind of give me the draft. I came up with the design, and we can use it literally the day after or 2 days after. It's really amazing to see how we can bring online and offline things together. Also, by the end of my project, I present this presentation, and everybody walk away with their favorite character of the dumpling. So we have offline versions of the tiny chaos or wonton. I print them into different prints and give away to every single person that's involved in this project. And so this is a great sort of example of, for the first time, I was able to actualize my dream, which is really bringing art online and offline through engaging with a larger amount of people and co-create this experience together. So this is IDEO Shanghai Creative Fortnight program, and everybody walk away with a physical print, but also they have a digital version of the tiny chaos on their phone. But it really kind of started with a silly text about the bling bling dumpling. So a lot of times, something much bigger could come from something. It's really, really small. It's just a little idea, and you execute it. And you execute it with the right people. And you do it to kind of really capture. You do the work to capture the idea. And you execute it with the people who can help you to cultivate and foster the development. And it becomes something much bigger. So N for nurture. The next example I'd like to show you is S for synthesize, which is this project. I'm actually very proud of this project. This is the original logo of it's a real estate company in Australia, and their name is Home 789, because in Chinese, the numbers kind of symbolize different meanings. So start, development, sustainability. So at the time, the CEO came to me and said, we would love to somehow figure out a way to integrate the English, which is home, with the Chinese character, jia. And I was looking at it, it's like, there's nothing in common, really. How do we integrate these two things together? then I was looking at the evolution of the character, how it came about from the pictorial version in the oracle, how it looks like. Because if you're really looking at the pictorial version, it's pretty interesting. It's the little home, the little roof, and inside the roof there's a little pig. So back in the days, our ancestors believed that if you have a pig underneath the roof, you have a home. Anyway, so, okay, this is interesting. Maybe we can replace the little notion of pig into something more abstract. So in this case, linking the typography of 789 into this more abstract version of the character pig and put it underneath the roof. I was pretty happy with it at the time. This was draft 1. And I sent it to the CEO, and he's like, oh, I like it, but something can be improved. And I wanted to ask my advisor, and I think you will like his advice because he's an amazing feng shui master. And I was like, whoa, I've never really worked with feng shui master. This is exciting and new. And part of me thinking, like, does this feng shui master has a design degree? Part of me thinking, well, let's be open, because he has been doing this for a long time. Must be something you can learn from them. And so I try to kind of let myself to sort of not forget about, but be open to new opportunities, but also be mindful about your expertise as well. So when you listen to advice from someone is coming from a different expertise, you could be able to receive something new. So he came to me, he said, hey, in feng shui, we don't really like sharp items. So perhaps you need to get rid of the sharp edges. And also, if you look at the green area, it's kind of redundant. So is there any way you can sort of soften the red area and get rid of the green area? Fine. So I came up with the second version and sort of hearing from his advice, and he's like, yeah, this is great. I love the 7.9 integration. It's much softer, but the roof is still not really integrating well, so can you do something about that? And I said, okay, but that's how the character is being structured. And he said, well, I believe there's a better way, and I believe that you have the ability to improve it. And I was like, okay, thank you so much, but that's an amazing hard task. And so I look back to the history of the roof, where it comes from, which is really, it's called the radical. So if you actually study kanji or Chinese or any Asian language, you would probably know it's like this little thing, like kind of like Tetris, tetramino. They have all these little radicals. So this is one of them. And literally the meaning of that is, according to Google Translate, is treasure hijab, which I was amazed. Is there any better translation of that? And then I was looking at it, I was like, okay, treasure hijab, what exactly is the treasure? The treasure was the Asian currency in China, which is yuanbao. It's an Asian currency which is used within Chinese throughout the ancient times. And the form of yuanbao is actually a very organic form. So I was looking at this, and I came up with a more organic version according to the treasure or yuanbao form. And this is the new radical of the home. And then I applied on top of the 789. It totally worked, or it totes working. So this is like how I came up with the solution of the Home 789, and this is also how the new symbol or the new emblem applied to different listings. Not trying to sell you anything. This is listing back in 2014, so don't worry. So this is a character that later on is being used as a new branding of this cross-culture real estate agency in Australia, and they're doing very well, and very, very happy to also know that the brand also get the branding excellence in 2015 and 16. So this is the sort of a little journey of Home 789, and the takeaway of this is S for synthesize. A lot of times you need to learn and also try to practice more to combine numbers of different things and different ideas and styles, and also be open and listen to people from very different industries, such as a feng shui master. They could really teach you something new. Okay, so this is also a really fun project I did back I was in Australia, this sushi company came to me, and their name, this is actually their original logo, called Go Sushi. They were not doing very well, and it was in the financial crisis period of time, and they came to us and they said, oh, we do amazing sushi, but people don't like our sushi. We wonder why. I was like, maybe we can start with your logo. So we look at the logo and we said, like I said, can we maybe change the name and make it more dynamic? And they said, yes, we're open to change everything. And so at the time, I was actually working in a creative agency, and I was executing the entire branding artwork and also strategy. So we came up with the name Wasabi Warrior, and I executed the Wasabi Warrior into different characters. I thought it would be a really great idea to kind of having an army of brothers of the Wasabi Warrior. So you have the beefy warrior, the porky warrior, the ocean warrior, the chicken warrior, the veggie warrior. Every single warrior brother actually indicate different ingredients. And also different personalities. So you give a bit of personality of the actual product, but in the same time, it connects to people or the consumer in an emotional level. And this is actually the interior design of the Wasabi Warrior. And it's really great to also see that the brand also was very successful, and they recently opened their new store in Hong Kong and also Philippines. And right now, they're the #1 sushi retail store in Australia with, I think, $2 million turnover every year. So the takeaway this one is P for personality, which is give personality to your product or your service. It helps users to resonate more with what you do and leads more sales in this case. The next one I'd like to say is I for Infuse, and this is actually one of my personal favorite projects. Is a project that I did in Disney Shanghai. And as you probably know, Disney had their new resort in Shanghai, China, and it opens in 2016. But when Disney approached me in 2014, because at the time they said, we are just building this amazing resort, but we needed to also recruit a lot of people. At the time, I think they're aiming to recruit 10,000 people with about 10,000 people with 50,000 applicants in order to select people. And they said the #1 important to run any organization is the actual human resources. So we wanted to do this recruitment campaign. We already knew what we want to sort of put it onto the campaign, which is Mickey for magic, Simba for growth, Mulan for courage, Elsa for dream, and Snow White for her female leadership as a CEO. Anyway, thank you. I'm glad you get it, especially in San Francisco. This is fun. So I was like, oh, this is great. If you look at it, they're very different characters. They're not even the same species, for God's sake. So how do we integrate this? I mean, they are clearly coming from different backgrounds and genres. So I was trying to figure out a way that I can actually integrate all these characters into almost one style language. And so I drew the inspiration from the Asian Chinese paper cut and was trying to kind of apply that to every single art pieces and recreate the art. And it was really great to kind of do the research and figure out what I can do, because you also have a lot of restraints when you're working with larger corporate brands. They already had a lot of guidelines that you have to kind of work within the guideline. And it's really great that they were also open to new ideas. And at the time, I was using the swirl traditional Lucky Wind, and also the tiger shoes, which they put on the little babies when they were born back in the days. And you have the Mickey wearing the tiger shoe with the lucky cloud. And this is Mickey. And Simba, that's also a challenge, because the briefing was we wanted to have the small Simba and the bigger Simba. We wanted to put them together, and we want them to appear on the same page. And I was like, if you put them together, the larger Simba become a Mufasa. It's like, how did you, but they're like, we want them to be on the same page to symbolize for the growth. Okay, so we need to figure out a way to have both of them appear on the same page without losing that identity. So again, I was doing a lot of research into African totems, but I drew the inspiration from, actually, what we can do is we can paint on the body of the Simba, the adult Simba. We can paint the little Simba onto the adult Simba, and that solves the problem. And we can have them coexist in the same page without confusing the viewers. So this is Simba. And Mulan, in this case, probably some of you know, the name Mulan actually means the magnolia flower in Chinese. That's a reoccurring picture in the Mulan movie. And so I wanted to kind of pay the tribute to the flower and put it into the actual design. So you have the magnolia flower kind of in the background and also in the foreground and in the actual pattern of the horse as well. So that's Mulan. Elsa, in this case, I was looking at it, I was like, there's nothing Chinese here. How are we gonna do this? So again, the paper cut. So I was looking at the traditional Russian dances, Russian or European, Scandinavian ballerinas and snowflakes, and looking at the paper cut style, and I came up with this Chinese paper cut style of Elsa. This is kind of the solution. And lastly, the briefing also told me that we needed to have the entire team there. We need to have the entire startup team, not just the CEO. We need to have every single dwarfs to be in the team. So then I thought, well, we can draw some inspiration from the forest, because that's where the dwarfs were living, and also the patterns from the plants and also flowers, and apply them onto the dress of Snow White and the foreground and the background. So this was the solution of the Snow White and Seven Dwarfs. And this is the actual illustration in real life, working with the campaign, and really amazing team of people working very hard at the time to recruiting people inside and outside, online and offline. And this campaign was very successful. It helped Disney to basically hire 10,000 people within 70,000 applicants. And this was the final picture of the people after the resort was open. So this was my little journey with the Disney recruitment campaign. Second last is for Infuse, which is the target market, local customs should be recognized, respect, and infused in the design. The next one I'm going to talk about is alpha research. It's a very short example, but I really like this example because it will give you some idea. Back in the days when I was working at 500 Startups, which is a seed investment VC firm that helped startup company around the world. And as the company was growing and expanding, we were having offices in India. And at the time, we needed to come up with a new logo for the India market. What's really, really challenging was at the time, I was looking at the global name 500, which is in Arabic numbers. And then I was looking at the Hindi of 500. It actually looks like a 400. So I was like, wow, this is crazy. So does that mean like if you speak Hindi locally, you'll get $100 off? So obviously, we cannot use the 400 logo. I mean, it looks like a 400 logo. And I need to move on to potentially translate the English name 500 into Hindi 500. This kind of works. But then there's another challenge coming up, which is I realized there are about 122 languages in India, and Hindi is just only one of the 20+ official languages spoken in India. Not everyone in the country speaks Hindi. This is amazing and also a huge challenge for me, because how we are going to fit all these languages into one single logo. So the Indian local team and I, we worked together to translate about 15 major language into 500, the writing, and also incorporating, try to figure out a way to incorporating the color of the Indian logo and the official 500 logo. So this is the solution. This is how you integrate everything together into one place. And so R for research. A lot of times you have to do research before you come up with the final design solution. Design research broadens your mind and provides a better understanding of the world. Okay, here's the last one. The last example I'm going to show you is E for engage. This is a project that I did back in the days in 2000, I think it was 2014. So in 2011 to 2013, Visually was this infographic platform, and it's probably one of the largest infographic platform on the world. And in 2014, they decided to pivot to a content creating marketplace, and they wanted to recruit more people like designers, animators, journalists, etc. And so they had an appearance at South by Southwest Interactive Festival. And in order to stand out of the crowd, because there's hundreds of thousands of people coming, actually more than probably 40,000 people in the space, and how do you capture all the attention, but in the same time you're competing with NASA and New York Times, these larger corporates have far more resources and budget to work it out. So at the time, the CEOs and the CMO we were working. The CMO was in Tel Aviv, and the CEO was in San Francisco. I was in Sydney. We were doing a Skype call, and they were saying, like, this is our original logo. We wanted to integrate it to the new marketing campaign, but can we find out a way to really concentrate the message, content is king? And I said, well, content is king. How about we just make the content king? If content is king, why don't we just personify the content king? So I came up with the content king, which is the actual personification of content is king, is the message. Again, it's all about making the interesting form of the message, the actual message itself coming from a linguistic perspective, and we give it a new interesting form. So I come up with this new character, which is the Content King, and we had it as almost like a brand ambassador, and we can put the Content King as a mascot onto posters. We put it around in town at the convention center. We also have it as a cutout, sort of photo booth prop, so everybody could actually interact with the actual Content King and the props. This is before Snapchat become popular, actually. So it was really great that you can have almost like an offline Snapchat filter that people could interact with themselves and also the brand with the people, and they can talk about, why are we having this? Like, it's easier engagement with your user. And the other thing is, every single person that walked by your booth starting to engage with you and leave a digital footprint of themselves, either by sharing the photos, hashtag, or sending the photos to themselves via the phone. And everybody also have a lot of fun. Again, it's the fun and the function sort of combination. And the team also had a lot of fun. They had so much fun. The other really interesting thing is we made stickers, and we also made the bag. We made the bag as big as we can so that everybody put their own bags into this bag. That's a great hack. And it was really successful. By day 2, all our bags were gone, and then we can see people just having the bags, walking on the street. It's amazing. It's an amazing experiment, and it's also great to see it's successful and people respond towards it. And this is actually day 1, where team were taking the photo, having fun. And by day 3, which is at the end of the event, all the props were gone. People loved them so much, and they took them home, which is great for us because we have less things to carry. So the takeaway, and this campaign was very, very successful. I think right after that, they were successfully raising another $3 million about several months later, and they got acquired in about a year later. So the message "content is king" was actually being popularized by Bill Gates in 1996. This is crazy. It's 22 years early, before now, and 22 years later. Now it's 2018. I would like to propose engagement is queen, and if you put the content, the really meaningful content with really engaging form together, this is how innovation happens, and this is really how magic happens. And when you put tech and art together, this is how you can really, this is the takeaway, by the way, guys. I for integrate, N for nurture, S for symbolize, P for personify, I for infuse, R for research, and E for engage. this is really how the magic can inspire more people and inspire more people around the world. And it's not about just inspire more people, but also inspire yourself and unleash your creative self. So thank you so much for being here, and please stay in touch. And if you have any questions, any ideas, any suggestions, please email me, tweet me, or talk to me. Thank you so much.